There are people who don't know the creators that you assume are everywhere. What is also true is there are people who are actively looking for help that still haven't found a voice that they trust. Mr. Beast has the biggest YouTube channel in the world with more than 350 million subscribers. And I have never watched a single Mr. Beast video. Not a single one. And what's crazy is I can't think of one person that I've ever talked to has ever mentioned him either, with the exception of the one time he was on Joe Rogan. But outside of that, nobody. And I'm talking about like other podcasters, my clients, friends, family, the people that I talk to like on a regular basis. Not a single person has ever told me that they've watched one single Mr. Beast video. And that's kind of crazy, right? Because like, if you think about it, or I guess if I think about it, I'm on YouTube every single day. Not a day goes by where I don't check into YouTube. Maybe that's because, I don't know, maybe that says more about me like in my life than I would maybe like to admit. But I'm on YouTube for work, for learning, for entertainment, podcast production. I live on this platform. But the big takeaway here is, if someone that big can still completely miss me and this entire pocket of people that I'm around, then the fitness podcasting space is nowhere close to being oversaturated. And so what I want to do today is really look into this and actually see what this means and why this matters to you. So first off, just to be clear, this is not about whether or not Mr. Beast is good or bad, or whether or not he deserves, the audience that he has. Shout out to him. Like, he is the guy that everybody, I guess would assume is the biggest YouTuber. I think he has that label. But again, like, I've never seen one video. Like, I'm sorry, like, I've never seen one Mr. Beast video. And so for yourself, let me know, have you ever clicked on YouTube and watched a Mr. Beast video? I'm curious. I don't want that to, blow up in my face, but I'm willing to bet you haven't. So again, this isn't about him, right? That's definitely not the point. The actual point is, if the largest creator on earth can still be basically invisible to me and a bunch of people around me, then like, reach does not work the way most people think it does. Right. And I'm starting to realize that some of my analogies start to get a little silly. And so with that said, let's dive into another one. But a lot of coaches talk about podcasting like the internet is one big room, and every listener has already picked their like go-to person. Like, they pick their winner. Like the market has spoken already, and the top voices have taken all the attention, and now there's nothing left for anybody else. But that's not how this actually works. The internet is not one room. It's millions of small rooms. And most people stay inside a pretty small number of them. So yeah, I told you things were going to get weird, but at least I forewarned you. So, but anyway, why this actually matters though, is because when you work inside of like the fitness space, your whole online world starts to bend around fitness. Your Instagram feed is fitness. Your YouTube recommendations are all about fitness. Your podcast feed is fitness. The ads you get are about fitness. Even the real life conversations you have are about fitness. All your inputs, all your feeds are full of the one thing that you are most interested in. So after a while, it does start to feel like everybody's doing the thing that you are into. Everybody's posting clips. Everybody has a microphone, a camera, a set. And most importantly, like, they have opinions about protein, hormones, fat loss, training splits, whatever. But you're not seeing the whole market. You're seeing just a tiny corner of it over and over and over. And you see it over and over again. And because that corner is familiar to you, it starts to feel crowded. Not because the market is saturated, but because your awareness of that market is very saturated, right? And that's a completely different problem. Excuse me. So if I, were to open up my feed and I see 10 coaches with podcasts, then another 10 on YouTube, then another 10 posting clips on Instagram, my brain starts to tell me like, hey, bro, I think it's a little packed in here. I don't think there's any more room. But those are just the accounts that the algorithm knows that I'm likely to stop and pay attention to. Again, that's not proof of oversaturation. That's just proof that the platforms are really good at showing me what I already pay attention to. And, again, this is where the Mr. Beast example is like so useful. Because if all of YouTube with all its data and, all its scale, the algorithm, all that power that it has still can't make the biggest creator in the world unavoidable to everyone, then how can a much smaller category like fitness podcasting already be completely taken over? The answer is it can't. The fitness podcasting space is just a tiny slice inside of a significantly bigger internet. And even the much bigger internet does not fully there is overlap, but it's not like, I'll explain that in a second. There are massive groups of people who never hear the names that you think are obvious, right? So again, there are crossovers, but I'll explain this again a little bit more clear in a second here. There are people who don't know the creators that you assume are everywhere. What is also true is there are people who are actively looking for help that still haven't found a voice that they trust. We're really going to dive into that in a second here. So when someone says podcasting is oversaturated, most of the time what they really mean is, I keep seeing other people who are doing the thing that I'm thinking about doing. That feeling is real, but the conclusion is just unfortunately completely wrong, or I guess fortunately completely wrong. Seeing a lot of podcasts is not the same as every potential listener being served. I'm going to say that again. Just because, or say it in a different way, just because there are a lot of podcasts doesn't mean that every single person on the planet is getting what they need from that podcast. Seeing a lot of coaches doing their thing is not the same as a coach that has already reached your future client. And once you really start to understand that, the idea of like the big names that, they taken over and they own everything, it starts to basically just fall apart. So let's dive in and let's make this even more concrete. Let's take the GOAT of podcasting, in my opinion, but let's take Joe Rogan. And in a weird way, he's kind of the person that's responsible for me being here talking to you right now. Maybe I'll dive into that in the future. But if you spend any time online in business, media, comedy, fitness, or just like any podcast circles, it can feel like everybody on earth knows who Joe Rogan is. People talk about him like he's just a part of like literally like culture, I guess I'll say, right? But if you step outside those circles, you'll still find people who refer to him as the Fear Factor guy or the UFC guy. And if you need proof, you can ask my dad. He's like 70 years old. If I bring up Joe Rogan, he kind of just is like, oh, the guy from Fear Factor? I'm like, well, no. And he's like, oh, that's right, the UFC guy. And I'm like, yes, but no, right? He's never listened to his podcast once in his life. And there's a lot of people that are just like that. So that should tell you something. It tells you that being massive inside of one category is not the same as being like universal across all people. It tells you that cultural dominance is usually just local, not total. And that matters a lot if you're a coach sitting there thinking, well, if Rogan exists or Huberman or Diary of a CEO, then why would anybody ever want to listen to me? But that's not how people choose. And you can see the same thing in fitness. All right. So here's, again, very, very solid, concrete, like the most evidence you're going to need. All right. Mark Bell's Power Project has done over 80 million views and downloads. That's huge. And, like beyond, it's not niche, right? This is one of my biggest, most proudest achievements. And this is not like, again, in the casual sense of the word, this is not niche. That's like a serious body of long form content built over time with a real audience, real authority, and legit staying power. And still, most regular people have no clue who Mark Bell is. And that's definitely not a shot at my boy Mark Bell. Like, my job was to make sure I can get more people to know who Mark Bell was. And we did a really good job. But there's so many people on this planet. And so, like, not that nobody knows, but like, again, outside of the fitness circles, people don't know who the hell he is. And it's not because we failed, not because the show was hidden, not because the content wasn't good. It's just because most people do not live inside of that room, right? And that's the idea you need to hold on to. Big creators dominate their room. Rogan dominates his room. Mr. Beast dominates his room. Mark Bell, same thing. Ooh, excuse me. Sorry, I burped up a storm again. I got to stop drinking so much stuff. Today we're having a monster. But anyway, the internet is not one giant auditorium where every person hears the exact same voice. It's more like a massive building with thousands of these tiny little rooms, and people drift in and out of rooms and they find the one that matches their interests, their goals, their problems, and, you know, just like their tastes. So when you say, like, all right, dude, like, someone already owns this space, what that usually means is somebody already owns the room that you personally spend time in. That is very different because your future listener may not be in that room at all.